Good morning from the garden. So it is the third week of October, and a little update for you guys since last week. We did not have the frost that we were expecting, so everything in the garden is still looking really good. I may actually try to make a few bouquets this week for some clients, but honestly, the plants are looking pretty tired, and so I'm pretty much just getting ready to rip most of it out of the garden and start planning for next year. So this morning I'm out here doing just a couple of quick projects, one of which is I am labeling all of my dahlia plants. So if you grow dahlias, you know that once the frost hits, all the dahlia plants look really sad and they look all the same and you can't tell the difference between them. So I am out here making sure that I have all of my dahlia plants labeled so that once I am ready to pull the tubers out of the ground, if we get a frost, I know exactly what every plant is. So let me show you all of the dahlias that I'm going to be digging, because I have a lot of plants to dig. Most of them were started by tubers, but some of them are seed plants that I'm going to be saving because I really liked how they turned out. Okay, so this is my main dahlia patch. I would guess there's about 40 dahlia plants in here. These were all started from tuber, and they should have markers at the base of the plant, so I should know exactly what they are. And then if we go across the path here, you can see my little patio pergola area in the background. Right next to my celosia, I have about 10 more dahlia plants, and these also should be marked very well. Then if we swing around, in front of my greenhouse, I have some seed dahlias. None of those I'm going to be saving for next year, but if we go down the path over here, sorry, it's kind of sunny, but in this area, I have about 8 to 10 more dahlia plants. These were all started from seed. These were all seeds from Flora that I got with the Discovering Dahlias book. And there are, I think, 3 plants in this patch that I loved that I'm going to be saving. Now in this seed dahlia patch, there are 3 plants that I really liked this year that I want to plant for next year. If you're not familiar with planting dahlias from seed, when you save the seed head, it is full of dahlia seeds. And if you plant those next year, they're not all going to be the same. Planting dahlias from seed is always a surprise. But those plants will develop tubers, and that is the mother plant. So when you plant the tuber year after year, you're always going to get the same blooms. And that is how people breed different varieties of dahlias. So out of all of my seed plants, I really loved 3, and I want those varieties for next year. So let me show you the 3 that I really liked. Okay, so here's a look at the first plant that I'm going to save. It is a reddish orange full-on double dahlia, and honestly this plant was probably one of my most prolific bloomers the entire season. It also had really nice stem length, good vase life, so this was a winner. I am going to save this one for next year for sure. Here's the second one I'm saving. This bloom is a little bit far along to use for vase life, but as they age, they turn a blush pink and white. But let me show you what they look like just as they're opening. So this one's a little less far along, but they open a really pretty pinkish lavender color, and then they age and lighten up. This is also a full double bloom, so I'm definitely saving this for next year. And this is the third one I'm saving. Now this bloom is definitely past its prime, but I think that you can get the idea how beautiful it is. This almost has that anemone look. So it has the big petals on the outside and then the little ruffly petals on the inside. And the colors are pinks and oranges and peaches. I just fell in love with this. And again, these seed dahlias were all seeds that I got from Flora with my Discovering Dahlias book. So this is what I'm going to be marking everything with today. I'm not actually sure what it's called. It was in the aisle at my local hardware store with all of the flags, like if you were going to flag an electrical line in your yard. It was $1 or $2 for the roll, and it comes in a lot of different colors. I'm just going to be simply writing on it with a Sharpie with a variety of dahlia and tying it around the base of the plant. So all of my dahlia plants are marked at the base with these white tags, or should be. So I'm just simply going to write the variety of dahlia on this ribbon and then rip this off and tie it around the base of the plant. Now this ribbon is just plastic. It's not very thick. It does rip really easily, but this will hold until I'm ready to dig them up and mark them permanently inside. So I'm going to get all of these marked, including my seed dahlias. Okay, so all of my dahlia plants are marked at the base with that orange marking tape. So this video will pick back up another day after we've had a light frost and I'm actually cutting all my plants, digging and storing my dahlia tubers. Okay, so I am back out in the garden this morning. It is about a week later. We did end up having a very light frost, but we have not had our hard freeze yet. However, we are predicted to have that next week. We're going to get down into the mid-20s, and we also are predicted to have about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of rain tomorrow. So my goal for today is to get all of these dahlia plants cut down, all of the tubers dug and hosed off, and then hopefully tomorrow I can get them all cut and stored. So I'm just gonna start working at cutting these plants back and getting them all dug up, and I'll show you what I end up with. Now I should mention, when I'm cutting these plants, I'm not cutting them all the way to the ground. I'm leaving about 3 to 4 inches of the stem out of the ground. For one, so I can see where all my tubers are to dig them. And the second reason is because I want to make sure to leave that marker on there so that I know what the plants are. And then once I get them inside and I'm separating them all, I'll cut the bad stem off the top. Okay, so all of my dahlias are cut back in this bed and the one across the path. There were only 2 plants that I missed tagging last week, so I'm gonna go ahead and label those right now before I forget. I'm gonna clear out a few of the weeds while I'm at it, and then I'll be ready to start digging all of these up. Then I'm gonna hose them all off and take them inside, and they'll be ready to clean up and separate tomorrow. So to dig these dahlias up, I'm gonna be using my potato fork. And because dahlia tubers can multiply under the ground over the course of the season, when I dig these, I'm gonna put the fork a little bit away from the stem of the plant because I wanna try to avoid, if possible, slicing the tubers open. So let me move my camera a little closer so you guys can actually see what's going on. So my plan to dig these up is to just work the soil around the plant, and then I think once I get it loosened up, these plants should lift out of the ground really easily. And I'm really excited to see what is underground because most of these plants were planted as single tubers. So I'm excited to see what they look like now. So I'm just gonna get started. Oh yeah, this soil is definitely workable. There we go. Oh wow, look at that. So that looks really good. So this was planted as a single tuber, and it's hard to tell whether all of these tubers have eyes or not, but there's at least 10 to 12 tubers on this plant. A couple of them have broken necks, and so I'm gonna have to get rid of those, but once I get this cleaned up, I should have multiple plants from this one tuber. So that's exciting. All right, let's dig up another one. This soil is a little damp for my liking to be doing this, but since we're getting all of that rain tomorrow, it is now or never. So it's just gonna take me a little extra time to clean these off. So a couple of the little tubers actually broke off when I took this out of the ground, but they were so tiny I doubt there was an eye on them anyway. I'm just gonna try to scrape a little more of the mud off of here so we can see what we're working with. Now there's still some mud wedged in there, but that also was a single tuber, and this is Cornell bronze. So that's looking really good too. All right, I'm gonna get going and get all of these out of the ground, and then I'm gonna show you what I end up with when I'm done. Okay, so here they are. They're all dug and out of the ground. And to be completely honest, that was not my favorite job that I have done this year. I'm going to let these sit overnight and dry, and tomorrow I will start cutting them apart. Okay, so it's been a couple days since I dug all of these out of the ground, and I am now ready to get them cleaned up, divided, and put into storage for the winter. So the first thing I'm going to do is get these clumps all cleaned up. So first, I'm going to remove all of the roots off of the bottom of the clump because those are done for the season. And when I remove these roots, I'm just going to snip the bottom of the tuber. I'm going to cut it right off. That will callus over and be just fine. So you want to get rid of all of these straggly roots. The other thing I'm going to be doing is getting rid of any broken or damaged tubers. So this is a really good one to show you for an example. So this tuber right here you can see was broken half probably when I dug it out of the ground. I'm going to get rid of him. And then you can see this little guy, he is moving really freely. That's because he has a broken neck. So that tuber is never going to grow a dahlia plant again, so you want to get rid of that one too. All right, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to set this aside, keep going on the rest of these, and then we'll start dividing them. So here's another clump that'll be a really good example. All of these roots I'm just going to get rid of. You want to just cut the bottom of the tuber off, just like that. And the end of the tuber will callus up. You also want to make sure to sharpen and clean your pruners before doing this because they work so much better. This tuber looks really shriveled, so I'm going to get rid of him. And he's not cutting very well. Then here's a really good example of a broken neck. See this tuber? You can see right at the neck it is broken, so I want to cut him off too. Okay, that is all ready to divide. Okay, so all of my dahlia clumps are cleaned off. I have all of the roots removed. I've removed any broken necks or damaged tubers. And just for fun to see how many plants for next year out of this group that I end up with, I counted 25 clumps on my table. Now I dug more than that. There were a few that came out of the ground that I didn't think looked very good, so I just tossed them. But on this table, I have 25 clumps. So I'm going to go through and divide all these and we'll see how many I end up with. Now when I start dividing these, what I'm looking for is the eye of the plant. And I'll put close-ups on the screen when I actually start doing this, but you're looking for, there's a little black dot on the top of this tuber that's a little bit swollen, and that is the eye, and that is the growth point of your dahlia tuber. So the tuber needs the body, the neck, and the eye to grow. So you don't want to divide the tuber into a separate plant unless it has all three of those parts. So let me zoom in on this particular clump and I'll show you how I'm going to divide it. Okay, so as I look over this particular clump, I see an easy spot where I could divide it by 2. Now you can see this moves very freely. This is not broken, but back in here in the middle of the plant, it is a little bit loose. This tuber has an eye right here. So I'm going to cut right behind that and separate that from the rest of the plant. And I'm going to cut this off too, because that's just a piece of the stem. So this tuber is going to be a plant on its own. The eye is right here. And this clump, I'm just going to leave as it is, but this clump also has an eye. So I have divided this plant into 2 pieces. Okay, now this clump actually has 2 different stems on it, and so I'm going to try and divide it right down the middle. Now I can easily see that there's going to be an eye on this side, and I can see there's an eye on this side. So actually, I'm going to cut that right down the middle. Now there is an eye right here. There's actually another eye right here. So I could go ahead and divide this in half. I'm going to cut off the stem. And I'm going to cut this right down the center. There we go. All right, and then this one seems a little loose, so I'm going to get rid of him. And these are so jumbled up, I'm going to just keep these together. So this particular plant I divided into 3. Okay, so here is a really good example of one that I can easily divide. I see an eye here, one there, another one there, and another one here. So I'm going to try and divide this into 5 different plants. This particular variety says brown sugar. So I see an eye right here at the top of this tuber. I'm going to cut him off. There's an eye right here and there's an eye here. So I'm going to let this eye go with this full tuber. So I'm just going to cut right in between here. Okay, so there's an eye right at the top there. And then I'm going to get rid of this part. Okay, so this is what I have left. Now, there is a group of 4 tubers hanging off of the bottom here. And I don't necessarily see that there's an eye attached to those. I'm going to get rid of those because I don't want to waste space in storage for anything I don't have an eye for. So this is what I am left with. There is a definite eye here and one here. Is there one that goes to this side? I don't see one. So I'm just going to keep this together. So that one plant, I moved into 3 plants. Okay, so now that I'm getting a bunch of my tubers divided, I'm going to start wrapping them and storing them just so I can keep everything organized. There are a lot of ways that you can store your dahlia tubers. I'm choosing to use the saran wrap method this year. Now, I am in Northwest Iowa in Zone 5A. Our summers tend to be really humid, but we have dry winters. Not dry as in no snow, but dry as in air dryness. I actually run a humidifier in my house in the winter because it gets really dry. So I want to make sure that these are nice and sealed so that they don't just shrivel up and dry out over the winter. So this is a really simple process actually. This is just regular old saran wrap. I'm going to pull it out, and each variety I'm going to put in their own little package. So here's the brown sugar that I divided into 3 different clumps. I want to make sure that each individual tuber or clump is completely surrounded by saran wrap. So I'm going to just set it down, wrap it up. Now that is completely surrounded. I'm going to take the next one, put it in this same sheet of saran wrap, wrap again, then take the third one, throw that label away, then I'm going to wrap it again, okay, so that is all sealed. There are 3 different tuber clumps in here, so I will have 3 plants next year. And then to label this little package, I'm just using painter's tape because that's what I have. Okay, I have labeled that brown sugar. I'm going to put the tape on the outside of the saran wrap package. And this is going to go in a cardboard box with the rest of them in a cool, dry area. And hopefully they stay nice and firm over the winter and come out looking exactly like this in the spring. We'll hope so. All right, I'm going to get going on these and we'll see how many tubers I end up with when I'm done. One other thing I'm doing is when I put the name on the piece of tape, I'm also writing how many tubers are in this little package so that I have a count in the spring when I'm unpacking everything. So this one has 2 in it. Okay, so it's the next day. All of my tubers are divided, wrapped, and labeled and ready to go into storage. I started off with 25 clumps and I ended up with 60 tubers. And I am really happy with that number. Now, I did end up dividing a few of them pretty conservatively, just because I was a little nervous about damaging them. But overall, I am really happy with having 60 tubers to go into storage for next year. So that will be a really good number to mix with all of the dahlia tubers that I have already ordered for spring. And when those arrive in the spring, I'll make sure to do a video so you guys can see everything that I'll be planting next year. So that's going to do it for this video. The next big project in the garden will be planting all of my tulip bulbs this fall. So I will make sure to do a video on that to show you how I'm planting them, and then also all of the varieties I'm planting. So stay tuned for that. We'll see you soon.